Well, good morning, everyone. This is Tom Coy, Covenant Pastor at Milden Presbyterian Church in Sharps, Virginia. And this is our midweek meditation. It is Thursday, November 19th. We missed last week. I was away on vacation, but we're back in business this week. And we are continuing our series, excuse me, we're continuing our series on the fruits of the Spirit. This is a series of 9 different qualities or traits that we receive through the action of the Holy Spirit. And these qualities help us really to be more loving toward God and toward each other and really to ourselves. Very helpful, practical things that God gives so that our lives might be truly more like Jesus. And so we have looked at several already. Today we're going to look at the spiritual fruit of peace. Now, the question of the fruits of the Spirit really is helping us to understand the bigger question of what the Holy Spirit is in general. And we have discovered along the way that we know that God is Trinitarian. We know that God is known as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And we tend to be a little more able to talk about the Father and the Son part of God. We can describe that a little bit easier, but we always get a little, sometimes less sure about what the Spirit is. We have a vague idea, but it's really hard to wrap our minds around what the Spirit is and does. And so that's why it's so refreshing to have this fruits of the Spirit discussion, because the fruits are actually very specific examples of what the Holy Spirit can do for each of us. These are traits. These fruits are traits or qualities that the Holy Spirit can instill in us and grow in us to the point that the fruits themselves then impact the things we say and do. And so today we want to look at one particular fruit of the Spirit, and that is peace. Now, peace is something that we all long to have. And in a world so filled with contention, it is so elusive. It seems like the news headlines are always filled with not peace, but conflict. And actually, that's a secret of journalism, that people don't really like to read about peaceful things, even though we want it. We all like to read about things that are contentious. And so we hear about contentions everywhere. And hasn't 2020 been a year full of conflict? From, our shaky economy to the destabilizing effects of COVID and how it's impacted so many aspects of our lives, to the never-ending racial injustice tensions that we feel as a nation, to the contentious election that we're still involved in as I speak. That this has been such a year of conflict that it's really hard to feel any kind of peace at all. We long for it, we cry for it, but it never seems to be coming. It just seems to be more and more conflict. Is peace possible? The answer is yes, it is. It is possible. But we have to understand that it takes something remarkable like the power of God to actually make a difference in our lives. For instance, think about where peace calls out to us. We think about it in politics and wars, international kinds of situations where We want to see a world of peace like peace in the Middle East, and there never seems to be any. Uh, but actually, peace issues go even more local than those big ones. Those are the headline grabbers, but think about it. There are peace issues right in our own neighborhoods or in our churches or in our families. And sometimes peace becomes more of an interpersonal thing, say peace between spouses or siblings or friends, or may get even very personal as to conflict within our own personal souls. We may have a real divided mind within us. We may feel unsettled, unfocused, unable to really be content. There is a churning in our heart sometimes that just doesn't go away, and we want it to. We want to be at peace, but we don't know how to find it. Oh, it happens at all levels. And Jesus understood this quite clearly. He understood that it's really part of our own human nature to have conflict. That's kind of how we live. We're a critter that is often contentious. We're often seeing what is, but also what could be. We're troubled by unfinished business. We are noticing that as fine as things may be, other things are not fine at all. There's always something within us that is disruptive. And for us to get through this natural, psychological, emotional, spiritual churning in our hearts, to get beyond that, we really need to have a force that is bigger than ourselves to move us toward a peace. And that's where God can make a difference. And that's where the Holy Spirit in particular can make an impact on our lives by putting into us the qualities that we need for peace. And the Spirit itself has a way of nurturing that in us so that it grows and we actually become persons who can share peace. Not only just know it, but actually share it with other people. Now, I know this can be done. There is one beautiful example of a person who discovered the deepest peace possible. His name was Francis of Assisi. He was a young Italian man way back in the 1200s who was born fairly wealthy and grew up somewhat normal kind of life. But very early on in his life, he had a real revelation about what's important. And he realized that material possessions only got in the way of spiritual values. And so he pretty much took a life of poverty. But not just poverty. He also devoted himself to the fundamental values of charity, of service, of compassion. And so powerful was his insight and so convincing was his new lifestyle that others joined him, and it became a movement in the church. Today, he is known as, and still revered as, one of the most Christ-like of all the saints who embraced what it meant to be a person of faith and to live out those simple and yet profound values of Jesus. He stands today as an example that this spiritual gift idea is not just a nice theoretical idea. It really can happen to a person. And one of the greatest insights he ever had was about peace itself. And he wrote a prayer, which today stands as one of the most beautiful kinds of statements of what it means to be an advocate of peace in the world. This is the prayer of St. Francis, and it goes like this. I'll conclude my remarks today with this prayer. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned. It is in dying that we are born to everlasting life. The gift, the fruit of peace is something that can be shared with us by God. It has been shared. And for all those who seek it, ask and you will receive. Take care. God bless. And we'll talk to you again next week when we move on to our next fruit of the Spirit, patience. Take care.